In this video, we are going to talk about our first method of factoring, which is factoring using the greatest common factor. First, let's talk about what factoring means. It simply means to write a polynomial as a product of polynomials of lower degree. We're going to do an example in just a minute to make it a little bit more clear, but basically we're doing the same thing as when you factor a number. For example, if we have 12, I can write that as a factor, or a product of two factors rather, 3 times 4. We're doing essentially the same thing, but this time with polynomials, which means that there will be variables involved. Now we're going to learn several methods for factoring. Our first is factoring out the GCF. And all it means is that we are going to be doing the distributive property backwards. So let's recall the distributive property is simply when we do this multiplication, 5 times the sum x plus 6, I simply do 5 times x plus 5 times 6. Now these are equivalent, so we can use equal signs. When we are factoring, what's going to happen is I'm going to start with this polynomial, and I'm going to go backwards to where I'm writing it as a product or as a multiplication problem. Now there's 3 steps that we're going to do for factoring using the GCF. First, we need to find the greatest common factor. Make sure you think about your variables. Then we need to use the distributive property backwards. So instead of doing multiplication, we're going to use division. And then always check your answer. It's a simple thing to do. Just check by distributing. I typically do this 3rd step in my head. I don't write it down, but I at least do a quick check before I move on. Now, let's look at some examples. In our first example, we have 12x minus 8x squared, so that's the polynomial. We want to factor this by pulling out the greatest common factor. Now, off to the side here, I wrote out my factors for 8 and for 12, and hopefully we can see here that my greatest common factor there is 4. And then I need to look at my variables. So my GCF, my greatest common factor, is going to be 4, and then the x is common. The 1 is the lower exponent, so it's going to be 4x. Now my answer is going to end up being 4x times something. To figure out what the something is, I'm just simply going to divide each term by the 4x. So 12x divided by 4x. 12 divided by 4 is 3. X divided by x, they cancel out. Minus, I'm just bringing down the little subtraction sign. 8 divided by 4 is 2. And then x squared divided by x is x. Remember, when you divide with like bases, you subtract the exponents. 2 minus 1 is 1. You can do a quick check. 4x times 3 is 12x. 4x times negative 2x is negative 8x squared. So we know that we did it correctly. My factored answer here is this. Let's look at example 2. Now in example 2, I didn't bother writing out my common factors because as I look at example 2, see my 10, 20, and 5, they are all divisible by 5. So my greatest common factor is going to be 5, and then looking at my variables, y cubed, y squared, and y. So the y is common, smallest exponent is 1. So my factored answer is going to be 5y times something. To figure out the something, I divide each term by 5y. So 10 divided by 5 is 2. Y cubed divided by y is y squared. 3 minus 1 is 2. Plus 20 divided by 5 is 4. Y squared divided by y is y. Minus 5 divided by 5 is 1. Y divided by y is 1. So that is my final answer. Again, I can distribute to check. 5y times 2y squared is 10y cubed. 5y times 4y is 20y squared. 5y times negative 1 is negative 5y. Now you have a couple of example problems to do, so you're going to complete those following these same steps. Again, the steps: find your GCF, use your distributive property backwards, so you're dividing, and then check your answer by distributing.